Hello, everyone, and welcome to the nightcap session of day one of the virtual spring conference. Thanks so much for anybody here that's tuning in live. Looking forward to getting through some exciting data here. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, we will be going through the 2023 Employee Satisfaction Report. It's an industry-wide survey that Andrew and I have worked on together now for 2 years. This is the second year, so I'm really excited to be able to dive into some year-over-year changes. I won't spoil any surprises here ahead of time because we'll have plenty of time to dive into the data itself and welcome any questions or comments from everybody that's tuning in. Really excited to dive into, again, what's been a wild year to say the least, thinking about 2021 to 22 to now 2023. We talk a lot about brewery trends and the actual consumer side of things, but then also looking at the talent and the employees behind the scenes making everything happen. So without a further ado, we're going to get started here. There are a couple slides of background just so you can kind of understand the how we came to all this data, who was involved, where we're all bringing it from. So to start out a little bit about our why. So this is, again, an industry-wide employee data. We sent this survey distributed across January all the way up until about mid to late March. And everybody from bartenders to taproom managers to owners to brewers, we compiled all this data, and with the real goal of understanding that quality of experience. So why are people happy? Why are they perhaps not so happy? And then is there any trends here that we can take and make actionable as we move on for another year? Promises to be pretty wild in just the brewery scene. And yeah, kind of touched on discovering trends there, just trying to make this as actionable as possible for breweries and employees to feel empowered, to hear their voices and make sure that they are getting the best experience that they possibly can. So I mentioned this a little bit ago, the little how. So this is a survey that Andrew and I developed across the winter of 2021. So dating back now 2 years ago. The survey questions were pressure tested with a lot of input from industry leaders, and just want to make sure that we were capturing things that would truly be meaningful. This year's fielding was again between January and March of 2023 with that national audience, and then analysis was completed across this last week to build this presentation for y'all. To get a quick understanding of who it was that we got opinions from, we got opinions from 254 breweries. That is a 17% increase from last year's study. No change in state representation. 43 states were represented, but overall we had 330 responses. That's an 18% increase from last year's study. And then you'll see the role breakdown on the right: front of house, brewing ops, business roles, and owners. So you can get an idea for overall sample size there. And in a later slide, you're also going to see which roles fell into front of house, which roles fell into business and brewing ops, so on and so forth. Nearly 90% of our respondents were full-time, and 12% there being part-time employees. We had a more even split in our survey sample, male versus female. Last year, it was a little bit closer to 60-40, 65-35. And this year we saw that level out, 55% male, 45% female. And then in terms of the LGBTQ community, we had 12% of our survey sample identify as LGBTQ+. So first up in the section, we're going to talk about tenure and compensation. And we asked respondents, how long have you been employed at your brewery, and how long have you been in your current role at your brewery? So starting with the left-hand side, again, this is split out here by front of house, business roles, brewing ops, and owners. Half of respondents have worked nearly 4+ years at the brewery. 1 in 5 respondents started a new role in the last 12 months. The reason this slide is up here for y'all is to understand a little bit more about the audience and whose opinion we're capturing here. So with half of the respondents working 4 or more plus years at a brewery, we definitely have a very experienced group here. And then as we think about those percentages there of working less than 6 months or 6 to 12 months, a little bit less representation from people who are perhaps a little bit newer to craft beer, new to their brewery itself. So just to keep that in mind. We also saw from 22's report to 23's report, 10% less respondents started a new role in the last 12 months. So what that really shows us is, indicating potential stagnation and upward mobility, or it could just be, the sample size overall. But we did see fewer respondents starting a new role. So that means more folks are staying in their previous role than last year. Next up, we asked about compensation packages. And I want to illustrate the graph to you real quick and just go over what you're looking at. So we asked respondents to select all that apply. So you see wages and salary, paid time off, sick leave, those being the top 3 components of a compensation package. The yellow bars represent the 2022 study, and then the navy blue bar represents the 2023 study. So those percentages are across both of those studies, so you can start to see how compensation packages have shifted over time. So it's not surprising to see very, very high numbers there. Not a lot of changes in wages and salary, paid time off, as those are pretty standard. So what I want to draw your attention to here is where we start to see some gaps, where we start to see some of those larger percentage changes. And as you go down the graph there a little bit, the first one that we see there is the performance bonus. Yellow bar, 24% in 2022, and then 19% in 2023. That 5 percentage point difference there. It's been a very, very tough year for craft beer, and thinking about employee compensation packages, understanding that is perhaps an area where there have been some tough decisions. But on the other side of that coin, the option directly below there with pension/401k, seeing a 7 percentage point increase there from 2022 to 2023 and getting that pension or 401k. So thinking about those more long-term benefits that are going to really improve retention perhaps, or help employees envision themselves with a brewery down the road. If they're able to think about retirement, that's a really positive sign there. Other points that we see some increases on as we get further down the list: parental leave, we see a 5 percentage point increase from 22 to 23. And then those last two, albeit still at only 9% for 2023, love to see some movements in that direction too, where an increase in mental health benefits, an increase in fitness, and that physical aspect of health as well, showing that some breweries there are really dialing in on different elements and thinking about total compensation beyond just the paychecks. So this is where it starts to get really, really juicy here, is the compensation reporting. And before we dive into some of those numbers, going to go over the role groupings here. And front of house, all of the respondents were able to self-identify which role that they fell into, and then we grouped into these 4 categories. So the options for front of house or event staff. I'm going to skip to business roles. So that falls to anybody in sales, marketing, accounting, finance, etc. Just so you have an idea of who is making up the population. And then for reference, on the bottom left-hand side, you have the sample size there, nice and easy for everyone's review, so you can understand what's the overall number of respondents per category. So half of respondents are earning between 40 and 80K. That's right in the middle of the graph there, the sort of 2 sweet spots. And then business staff are the folks who are most likely to earn $60,000 or more year over year. This is an area where on the next slide, we're going to be looking at how respondents felt about their compensation. This was an area last year where we were able to really dive in, and this is a trend that we see still here. Brewing ops, that's often very labor intensive work, and they had perceptions of their pay that was often somewhat below fair pay or even worse. And as we transfer to the next slide here with compensation perceptions, these are broken out: front of house, business, brewing ops, and owners. I'm going to skip right down to the brewing ops to stay on that thread that I was mentioning earlier. So from 2022 to 2023, there was a very positive shift in perceptions of pay from brewing ops workers. So with that 2022, the yellow bars in the bottom left chart, we saw 49% being somewhat below fair pay in 2022. And then we honestly saw almost an exact shift from 2023, where we have 47% of brewing ops folks believing that they are paid fairly. And that could be whether that's due to raises, whether that's just due to changing perceptions, inflation. There are a whole slew of reasons and hypotheses that we could have hours of conversation on alone. So really, really fascinating to see that shift just over 1 year. And then also going to draw attention to the business crowd here. That's going to be the graph in the top right corner of your screen. And right there, we see actually almost the opposite of negative shifts in perceptions year over year. With that extremely above fair pay in 2022, 14% of business folks felt they were extremely above fair pay. That went down to 2%. And then as we look at the somewhat below fair pay bars here, in 2022, only 1 in 4 folks felt that they were paid below fair pay. And in 2023, that actually shifted to almost 4 out of 10 or 2 out of 5 workers feeling that they are paid below their market value. Less year-over-year changes in front of house and owners, but definitely wanted to call out the brewing ops and the business changes year over year, with business folks feeling they are not compensated as fairly. Brewing ops, the opposite shift there, with more folks feeling like they are fairly compensated. Up next, we have sense of belonging. And for sense of belonging on these slides, rather than breaking it down by front of house, by business, or by role, we actually took a look at gender and then LGBTQ community status, whether you identify with that community or not. So first up, safety and authenticity. We asked respondents to rate their level of agreement with the following statements. On the left-hand side, I feel safe around owners, managers, and coworkers. On the right-hand side, I can be myself at the brewery. So what those percentages are that you're looking at in the table are the percentage selecting agree or strongly agree with those statements. And again, the yellow bars representing 2022, and then the navy blue bars representing 2023. So overall, psychological safety remains high across all groups. The LGBTQ plus community, they reported marginal increases in being able to feel safe around the owners and being able to be themselves at the brewery. And this is a really welcome thing, because just across 2022, focusing on those yellow bars, you can see that across both of those questions, that was the community least likely to feel those things. So very, very positive percentage point increases there. Good news for craft beer becoming more inclusive. Up next, we have management and innovation. On the left-hand side, we have I can approach my manager about an issue without fear of retaliation or unfair treatment. Again, these levels remained high overall. We did see some small percentage point decreases for women. The LGBT community was, again, an area where we saw increases in these. And then shifting to the right-hand side of your screen, being able to propose new ideas and that they will be valued by colleagues. This remained at high levels with some marginal increases. Not too much of a wild story here, but just still good to see Very, very high percentages here agreeing or strongly agreeing with those statements. Up next, we have performance motivation. And we asked respondents to select, again, on that same scale, that same agreement scale, do you feel motivated to do your best? I feel motivated to do my best. To what extent do you agree? And this is where we started to see a little bit more percentage point deviation across groups here. Females actually feeling most driven to do their best, and only 10% do not feel motivated overall. That's a number that's not directly on the graph there, but just wanted to call that out. That's a very low percentage of folks that are not feeling motivated to do their best. But when we look at the percentages here, it is the LGBT community that does not necessarily feel motivated to do their best at the brewery. The next section we have is training and performance. So for job training, continues to surface as a pain point across demographics. This is one of the key takeaways from last year's study, that this was an area where people did not necessarily feel like they had the most support. And just one note for the logistics of these numbers, anybody that selected NA for this option, those numbers were subtracted when we are doing the percentages for these graphs. So you are getting a true representation here that for 2023, 50% of females feel like they were properly trained for my role. That is a true number, regardless of anybody that has selected NA. Those folks were subtracted from these responses. So again, this is a takeaway for 2023, feeling about the sentiments of being able to be properly trained, an area to continue to improve, and just have conversations with employees. So thinking about that as one of the key takeaways from this year's study. Mentorship here, having someone to ask questions about my role at the brewery, seeing similar sentiment here, similar numbers, and kind of going hand in hand with training. If you were properly trained, you probably have somebody that you feel like was a mentor or leading that process perhaps. And then moving on after training, thinking about, okay, I've been in my role for 6 to 12 months. If that person didn't exist in those first 6 to 12 months, highly likely that these folks aren't going to feel necessarily like they have that person as time continues to go on. Professional development. This was an area, again, that I would call a pain point from the previous year, but this was an area where there were actually some decreases. So another takeaway point, fewer folks actually feeling like they have meaningful professional development opportunities to continue growing with the brewery. And this study defined professional development opportunities as on-the-job training, as industry conferences, industry certifications, those sorts of things. And as we see, the only group that felt like they had meaningful professional development opportunities, the only group that we saw an increase in that from 22 to 23 was for the male population, and a significant drop off there for women. And regardless of LGBT status in general, those are some pretty large percentage drop offs. So when breweries are thinking about professional development, make sure that we're thinking about that in an equitable way, really across gender. And it's just goes to show the importance of organizations, Pink Boots Society, any sort of women in beer, women in craft, all the more important to have those types of opportunities for female employees, because this is an area certainly where we would like to see the numbers going up for everybody, and not just our male colleagues. Next up, we have resources. We asked respondents to rate their level of agreement with my brewery provides the necessary resources to perform my job well. This is, I would say, middle of the road, around 70% overall, and not seeing too much meaningful change there. So again, just emphasizing, for any brewery that's wondering, why, have conversations with the employees, see what it is that they need. Perhaps it's equipment, perhaps it's a stipend, whatever it might be, just to try and get these numbers up. Because if 3 out of 10 employees don't feel like they have the resources to be performing their job well, and then they don't necessarily perform the best over a 6-month period, and you're having conversations about performance improvement, have those conversations proactively. The idea of stay interviews in the corporate world are really catching steam in a world where there are more options and more opportunities for employees to perhaps go and get paid more. Just trying to be proactive so it doesn't boil up into, oh, like this person left. Let's figure out why they're thinking about leaving before they ever leave, and see if that's something within our power that we can mitigate a lot of those circumstances. Next up, we have overall happiness, and this is one of the higher level sections that we have some rather like blanket statements, but still pretty valuable to think about. First up, we have happiness and respect, and the statements here where there's mutual respect between my coworkers and me, and I am happy to work at my brewery. These percentages we see very, very small changes overall. The one thing that I will call out is 22 to 23 on the left-hand side of your screen. We did see a pretty significant percentage drop off from our LGBTQ plus associates and colleagues. That is a 14 percentage point decrease there, rather significant. And especially when we didn't see that level of drop off for males, females, or non-members of the LGBT plus community. Shifting to the right-hand side of the screen, we see similar trends. I'm happy to work at my brewery. Not a whole lot of change year over year there. Relatively high percentages with, basically 4 of 5, 8 of 10 or more employees feeling that they're happy to work at the brewery. And then again, the LGBTQ plus community being the least likely to agree with that statement. Here we took a look at happiness versus role. So we've been looking at a lot across the gender perspective there, and then LGBTQ status identification as well. But wanted to break this down by role. Happiness levels remain very, very high overall. The group that shows the lowest level of happiness is brewing ops. And this is a theme from last year. We did see a small percentage point increase from 22 to 23, but still front of house and business folks are generally much more happier than the brewing ops folks. And very, very thankfully, we still see high levels of happiness with our owners. Slight drop from 100 to 96%. I wouldn't make too much of that overall, but people in general being very, very happy. Next up, we have perceptions of ownership and management. On the left-hand side of the screen, you're looking at perceptions of ownership. The right-hand side of the screen, perceptions of direct managers or supervisors. So here you were taking a look, and the numbers increased year over year, and perceptions of brewery ownership across really all groups. So that's a win. Just in general, not seeing any super significant callouts. There are certainly more relevant and prevalent takeaways that we've kind of already covered there, and differences between LGBTQ plus and non-LGBTQ plus. Shifting to the right-hand side of the screen, we do see pretty similar numbers overall in terms of perceptions of ownership versus perceptions of manager. Not too much of a story there year over year. Up next, we asked respondents to see what their perception of the brewery was overall. So my brewery has a positive reputation and image. These numbers remain high year over year, slight increases across all populations, with the lowest being 4 or 5 LGBTQ plus respondents agreeing that my brewery has a positive reputation and image. I do just want to call out as well with the LGBTQ plus population with an N size of only 38. It's a lot easier to get some significant percentage differences with that lower N size, especially when we're comparing with male size of 183, female 132, and then non-LGBTQ plus population being 270. So some of these percentage differences that we're calling out can certainly be, at least in part, attributed to the sample size. Employee retention. We asked respondents here, I want to continue learning and growing with my brewery. I'm going to let you all take this slide in for a moment while I take a sip of water and catch my breath. Again, we're looking at the percentage of respondents saying that they agree or strongly agree with this statement. And seeing that retention, again, the same story across these last couple of slides, increases in the male and female population and the non-LGBTQ plus population. And then looking down at the LGBTQ plus population, seeing a 9 percentage point drop from 22 to 23. Overall, again, still pretty high numbers with that 4 out of 5 or 9 out of 10, depending upon which population you're looking at. I think in general, this is a very positive slide. In an industry where the pay is not as much as you could possibly get in other industries, seeing this level of a desire to continue learning and growing with the brewery, something that's really special, and I think speaks to just the camaraderie across, whether it be employees or just community involvement. As we know, breweries can be such just beacons of an entire community and bring everybody together. It's very clear just based on this slide alone that employees value being a part of that and enjoy playing a hand. This has been one of the most exciting slides as we were building this report. Happiness factors. On the left-hand side, you're looking at things currently contributing to happiness. And then on the right-hand side, factors contributing to future happiness. I know you're looking at a lot of bars here. Again, the yellow representing 22, navy blue representing 2023. We see an increase on the left-hand side here in importance of people. So anywhere that you see the blue bar being larger than the yellow bar is something that's more important year over year for right now than it was a year ago. And it's not to say, as we look at coworkers being the top thing, most important factor currently contributing to happiness, see a larger blue bar there, a slightly larger blue bar under welcoming brewery environment, base wages and salary, a shorter blue bar, benefits, a shorter blue bar. These are, compensation will always be king, but I think it's still fascinating to see a little bit of a shift in the importance of people, because as we move to the right-hand side of the screen, factors contributing to future happiness, I'm going to draw your attention down to about midway through the slide. Relationship with coworkers, that blue bar reaching nearly 50%, as it was closer to, it's about 35% there. Excuse me, in the yellow bar, people are focused on their relationships at work, and the idea of more mental health benefits and just a focus on well-being. And in 2023, as we're now nearly fully in a post-pandemic environment in most places across the United States, people are very, very focused on their relationships, whether that be coworkers, managers, owners, etc. So I do want to call out, as I've just gone on a personal little soapbox about the importance of relationships, base pay raise is still the number one most important factor contributing to future happiness. It just dropped in importance a little bit year over year, albeit it is still number one. With that, we have arrived at the Q&A portion of the presentation. It was funny, I was chatting with Andrew behind the scenes to see an estimate of how long this presentation might take. And we are right at 5:31 on the dot. So for any listeners that we might have tuning in live, welcome any questions, any comments, and I'm gonna go ahead and just fast forward to the next screen with both of our contact information, just so it makes the recording for anybody that is watching at a later time. This is where you can reach either Andrew or I. It's been such a pleasure to be a part of this study and put this together. Some meaningful changes year over year there as we think about some key takeaways. Professional development being one, training being another, both pain points from 2022 that have again surfaced in 2023. And then I think capping it off there with that last slide of factors contributing to future happiness, we see a much more increased focus on relationships and coworkers. So gonna pause here, maybe 30, 60 more seconds or so, see if anybody else has some questions or comments. But if not, I appreciate you tuning in. Look forward to anybody who's going to watch this at a later date, welcoming any questions, comments, feedback. And yeah, thank you so much all for listening and for your time today.